Hey guys, Dr. Kori here at the Diet Doc. Welcome to another masterful Monday motivational session. What are we talking about today? Well, I'm going to talk about 4 ways to overcome perfectionism. So here's the deal. This is the message I received from a client. Perfectionism. I'm sure you've touched on this, as my client said, but I find that as a client being coached, my type A personality and the fact that I have a background in research, I always want to be on the dot with things, okay? I want to do the same amount of cardio and training every day. I need to hit this exact calorie budget, and focusing on the small details begins to surpass the big picture and just really makes me feel more obsessed and compulsive. So here's the deal. Number 1, I think we need to take into consideration that underneath the label of perfectionism, this person has a lot of skills, aptitudes, abilities, and competencies. One of them being he's pretty darn disciplined if he can do those things and do them well and do them so consistently, right? But everything operates on a continuum. And in order to succeed and attain the goals that we desire, of course we have to have a level of discipline. The daily responsibilities that we've talked about so often that we need to take seriously to ensure that we are moving one step closer every time we make a decision, as opposed to moving further and further away from those aspirations that are important to us. But we have to ask ourselves, what are the daily disciplines that are necessary for the goal pursuit itself and for becoming the person that we most want to be? This person clearly doesn't want to be a perfectionist because it's uncomfortable. He feels driven instead of feeling like he's doing the driving, right? So if obsessive and compulsive are not feelings or traits that he wants to be or experience, then who does this person want to be? How does the person that he wants to be act and think? Then we create daily disciplines that have him practicing building those strengths and those virtues and building in those behaviors consistently into his life. So really what we're doing is we're going to shift the label. We're shifting from this person being a perfectionist into an optimalist, okay? So here's number 2. We have to remember that every strength, so this person's strength of discipline, of being detail-oriented, okay, every strength can be over or underused. And perfectionism is overusing those skills, okay? This guy is super regimented. That can be good to a point. Remember, continuum. But what it also does, being a perfectionist, is it negates this person's other strengths, okay? Because he's overusing these detail-oriented ones and getting to a place where he is so incredibly rigid. And it offers zero room for, and you've heard me talk about this over and over again, compassion, joy, enthusiasm, and ultimately a real true sense of mastery, okay? Because when we master something, we need to focus on the process and not so much the outcome. We need to be thinking about out here this big picture, but we need to also be focusing on the process, not just the fine details, but the process itself and the steps we're taking to get there. And in this case, this is with perfectionism, focusing on the process as opposed to the person. Okay, I made a post recently about if you weren't afraid, what would you do? And I believe that there is a ton of fear underneath perfectionism. Fear about getting it right, fear about rejection, fear about people making fun of you, fear about not being good enough, okay? And that's all focused on the person. That's all ego. When we shift to focusing on the process, it changes the game. So when we're attempting to be on the dot with things, those are his words, and on the fine details, you know, we have better aim, usually, and that's a good thing. The part that's missing is in the letting go of the areas of the process that we can't necessarily control. A perfectionist tries to control everything. We can't control everything. So as an example, when I was working on my dissertation, I had to discipline myself to ask consistently. This is where who do I want to be comes in, and how does that person act? Consistently to ask myself, is this good enough? Okay, I needed to learn how to be a good enougher to avoid burnout. And that's what that compulsiveness can lead to, okay? I had to learn to let go of the fear of what my dissertation chair was going to say, of her rejecting this draft, of her marking it all up and saying, this needs to be completely redone. I had to let go of all those things. You know, I've also used the example of an archer. So this person focuses on the details of how he's going to hold the bow, right? How he's going to stretch the arrow, how he's standing to set himself up, where he takes aim, but then once he lets go and the arrow is gone, he's done. He has to let go of control. He doesn't know whether the wind is going to blow and where the arrow is going to go, okay? So we have to recognize that we can't influence everything. So we need to ask, what about this may I influence? But then because we know we're perfectionists and we'll say, well, everything, then we have to follow that up with, are all of those things worthy of my influence? Because do they align with the person that I want to be? Okay, here's number 3. I'm always talking about mind-body integration. We can focus up here all we want to, but, you know, we have to learn to recognize the signs of that obsessiveness. And some of the signs are up here, okay, in our minds and the way that we're thinking. But this recognition is going to be the first step to shifting from perfectionist to optimalist. We have to shift the mentality, and that occurs in the body as well. So how does your body and your mind let you know that you're approaching that not so healthy drivenness? Dr. Dan Siegel, who's one of my favorite researchers and teachers, he discusses coherence, and that's the space where we feel more aligned and in flow, right? And he uses a river to illustrate it. So if you think of a river and you think of the 2 banks of the river, one of the banks is chaos, the other bank is rigidity, and in the middle is this nice flowing river. That's coherence. Well, perfectionists are either on one bank or the other instead of in the middle and allowing the river that's running to carry them. And I can hear the perfectionist out there thinking, but I don't want to be carried. Like, I want to control the process. You know, how do I know where I'm going to end up if I'm just being carried? And we're missing the bigger picture here, which is you're either swimming, right? Or you're floating, or you're in a boat with some oars, and this is where you ask the question, what about this may I influence? The river's going to keep running. That's life. Life keeps going, but we get to ask ourselves, where am I going to put my actions and attention? All right. So it really is, it comes down to, how am I going to direct my attention? And to get to that point, when we feel like we're being driven, we have to first offer ourselves some compassion, okay, some understanding, recognize that our intentions as a perfectionist are good. Our intentions are good, they're benevolent. You know, we're not trying to hurt anyone, we're not trying to hurt ourselves. just happens to be that we are, based on the lack of discipline that we have for putting our attention toward what needs it, okay? And what that means is then we have an opportunity to experience the joy that can come from actually pursuing what's important to us instead of what we feel like we're driven to pursue, and that really isn't aligned with what we feel is like our soul oxygen, right? So we have to practice accepting reality that life is going to happen, and there are things that we just don't have any manner of influence over, and we need to practice directing our attention. Because here's number 4. We are either letting our attention happen, and often with perfectionism, it's just happening, okay? And that's where we end up feeling compulsive and driven by something. So we're either letting or we are looking at what needs our attention. And that's where the directive piece comes in. When we recognize we're going down that chaotic or rigid path, that's when we redirect our attention to the center, ask ourselves those important questions, and then move forward in a way that feels more empowering instead of driven by something else. So overcoming perfectionism, guys, it starts with a willingness to see what we are, the skills that we have, and that our intentions are good. So what we are with as opposed to what we are without, focusing on the process as opposed to the person. And reining things in a way that we're not being guided, okay, but we are doing the guiding, and then bringing enthusiasm to the process too, okay, focusing on those incremental growth steps and less about the ego and what's wrong with us and how we need to get it right all the time. As I'm filming this video, I'm like noticing, oh good, I remembered my lipstick, except my fingernails aren't painted. Oh, look, I said, am I going to go back and refilm this entire video? Heck no, I'm not. Because here's the other thing I do to get out of perfectionism. What is my ultimate aim in terms of contribution? I want to provide information to you guys that helps you, that moves you, okay? That sparks ideas and sparks a new perception, and my fingernails don't matter. So let's take all of these things into consideration, guys, and really focus in on, direct your attention towards what is truly important. Have an awesome Monday.